So hey guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of Welcome Home Stay Well series. This is where we aim to interview individuals, groups and organisations to start powerful questions around topics that can help to support our community's well-being. Today I'm joined by my guest and my brother Phil Surry to explore the question, what can happen when men come together? So Phil is the founder of Man Club, a space for men to just come and talk or listen. Man Club has grown vastly over the course of the last 3 years and has created a brotherhood that has helped to change male culture locally here in Guernsey. And even further afield, its impact has been far-reaching with the success of the award-winning film that some of you might have seen called Man Down, which actually featured a number of the guys from Man Club. Man Club itself actually quite simply started in Phil's living room, and I know that because I was there at the time, with a couple of us guys, and the principal was using this Native American tradition of utilising a talking stick. And the circle has now grown actually to regularly exceed 20 guys, or more in some of the meetings I've heard. Men regularly come together outside of the group and have definitely bonded, I think Phil would agree, as a result of the relationships that have grown through the club.
Yeah.
And as well as running Man Club, Phil is an very experienced and highly skilled remedial massage therapist. He's a Reiki practitioner and he's a coach who's got over 10 years of experience with working with men. Phil will tell you himself, he has witnessed many changes to himself and the men that he's known over that time. And today we're here really to talk about his experiences and some of the next steps for Man Club. So Phil, thank you so much for joining us on the Stay Well series.
Thank you very much indeed for having me here today with you, matey. And it's good to have an opportunity just to share and to have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what we're hoping, from all of the series that we record on Stay Well is that our conversation just inspires somebody to perhaps learn more about Man Club or to explore some of the topics that we'll kind of get involved in today. And I know that we've written a number of questions and stuff that we'd like to explore today, and we'll let the conversation flow as much as we can. But I suppose, I'd just like to get started by asking, to you, what are the fundamentals of this brotherhood, this concept that you or other groups have come up with, Man Club, and what's your experience of that personally?
Yeah, I think we almost go back to the very first seedlings of the first Man Clubs that you were present at. It was really just a coming together of a few guys in my living room, ready for just an open chat about what they're going through, what they're feeling, or even just a bit of philosophy and just a general chat. There was no real structure to it. But as it grew, we started to explore it more. And I know over the sort of last 3 years, the further I went with it, the further I journaled, the further I read in books, and the further I witnessed what was happening. Some real fundamentals started to come out of that in terms of how this brotherhood was forming at such a powerful level. And bear in mind, of course, I know you've been at some of the meetings when we've had ex-guys, guys from ex-forces and the army and the forces and the police force as such, and I've talked about it in a way that compares in terms of that brotherhood of that the guy next to you has got your back, and I think that's really based from absolute being able to be vulnerable and being able to actually completely share whatever you want to share, and know full well that no one in that room is going to judge you, no one's going to interrupt you, and you've got the floor to say anything you want. When you hold that talking stick, there's no one there to stop you. And the beauty is as well, in life, when you say a comment or you talk about something, somebody's always got something to say. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone has to, put their oar in, so to speak. But at Man Club, that it doesn't have to be the case. You say what you want to say, and if you don't want any feedback from anyone, you don't have to have it. You can just say it's off my chest, and you'll get your round of applause. You'll still get your compassion, and that's it. And if you do want your words from the guys, then all you're going to get back is encouragement. And that, surprisingly, it doesn't even sound like a lot, but it's actually missing in our day-to-day life on a regular basis. How often can you just sit down with somebody and talk to them, and you know what you're going to say is just going to be heard, really listened to. It's not going to be judged. You're not going to be thrown tons of advice your way. But you know that every man in that room has also been through their own thing and is there to talk. And I would absolutely love to meet somebody out there that hasn't been through something in their lives that they've suffered from or they've struggled with. This notion that, 1 in 2 people or whatever, or I don't know the stats now, I can't even remember them off the top of my head, but will suffer from mental health. I would say it's 100%. I'd say everyone in their life has suffered. You might get up one day and feel a bit down. That's a form of suffering. You might suffer a horrendous loss. It could be something relative to you, it could be something irrelevant to someone else. It makes no difference. We're all on our own personal paths.
It's almost like the glue that binds us all together, right? Is this common human experience of suffering, and what you're describing with Man Club is a space for males to explore and support each other through that.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting, like over the years reading a lot of different books and thoughts on that, as I know you have yourself. You're a well-versed guy. But I think with guys particularly, there's a lot of, Robert Bly talks about it a lot, how since ancient times, we've always grown up in tribes. We've always had male figures, either our father or mentors in communities that have taught us. So in essence, so farming, for example, most of our work in life would be on farms. In tribal practices, you'd learn to hunt. You'd be taught how to be a man. You'd actually have almost a blueprint of what you're expected to do. And that was there for thousands of years in all different cultures in different ways. And then in Western society in particular, with the Industrial Revolution, that started to change. Men were going into factories, offices, and as it is perhaps nowadays, you might not see your dad, for example, until late at night when you go to bed, or on holiday as such, or so there's almost like a search for male mentors. Well, it's certainly what Robert Bly argues with, and it certainly resonated in me, and it made me think a lot. And many guys are looking for that as well. And that mentorship may not always come from an older guy, but having another guy there to kind of work out what are we doing here is a real thing. And I think guys, there's generally in our Western society, as we've moved on, this loss of purpose for so many guys is so prevalent. And particularly, the last few months in lockdown, I know for so many of us, it's been a case of suddenly you've looked around and realized what's really important to you, and what matters. And I think that's really kind of brought my awareness up even further around that whole subject.
Yeah, no, and I completely resonate with everything that you shared, Phil. I mean, my personal experience, I'm happy to share on for the kind of viewers, is that I grew up, my parents were separated, and I didn't have a strong masculine figure in my life. And in fact, actually, I had my mother and a very close aunt, and so I had some really very dominant feminine figures in my life. And as I grew up and aged into a man, if you like, and even in the last couple of years, I'm 26 years old now, and I feel like I have only really been going through the rite of passage in some aspects of my masculinity in the last couple of years, since joining and Man Club and meeting yourself and all the people that have been involved with that. And I think it's incredibly powerful because as you said, masculinity can be quite bashed, I think, in some circles around this concept of toxic masculinity. But it's not a case of, I always laugh and say it's not a case of focusing on maybe more toxic aspects of, masculinity in our Western society, but actually how can we cultivate the more wholesome and sometimes the more feminine aspects, to be honest, of masculinity. And I've personally found, through my experience in Man Club, it's really helped to strengthen me and opened my eyes to areas of myself and my personality that I perhaps hid away from or believed that would never really fully develop because of something that I'd been missing in my life.
Yeah, completely agree with you on that. And I mean, yeah, talking about just the subject of masculinity. I mean, we spoke a little while ago about the film, the documentary film, The Work, and just to surmise, of course, well, it's a process that goes on in prisons. It's where a number of guys come together and will go through a process where they will really get their trauma out. And that film to me really did bring things together for me, because in that film, there's a container that they create for each circle of men, and in that film, a man can just let everything go, and it's violent. There's sheds of anger, but these are hardened criminals. These are guys with deep traumas, and that comes out. And what is so fascinating about that documentary, it's obviously worked with hardened criminals and the like, but those that do make parole, I think it was a 0%. It's a 0% reoffence statistics for that, and I found that absolutely remarkable. And there was something in me with that that really made me think, like, it so often in our society, it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay to express aggression. It's not okay to do these things, and we're taught this from such a young age. And it's like anything. You can love somebody and hurt them. You can love somebody too much, and you can be too kind and hurt them. It's all about the balance. It's all about where it's directed and how it's used. If you look at something like martial arts, or you look at ways that you can use that. And men are not always good at communicating, and we're being actively encouraged to talk, and that's not a bad thing. It's certainly filled a huge gap, and it's helped us come together. But there's also a whole aspect of this of actually guys can come together and they can use ways to channel energy, because that energy, don't forget, it's the same energy that has protected tribes, that has looked after loved ones for so long, for thousands of years. It's ingrained, and not everyone, of course, but that is the masculine energy that we're talking about, and everyone has that in them in a different degree, whatever the gender. It's just focusing on something that quite often, and in some cases, of course, has rightly been put down as being toxic when it's gone wrong, when it's gone AWOL, and it's been used in the wrong way as such. It's the great balancing act, isn't it, really, I guess?
Yeah, no, it really makes me think, a lot of examples that we see in our culture of toxic masculinity are more kind of domineering, perhaps, personalities. And, I think that's what really distinguishes Man Club in particular, which, is obviously a format that is, been a rite of passage for indigenous cultures and stuff for thousands of years. And I'm really interested to explore with you, what do you think it is about the circle and about the ritual, because that's essentially, what you've recreated here, or what men are recreating in these comings together as a kind of brotherhood. What is it about that you think just transforms the way in which that energy, that masculine energy, kind of works?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the circle basically, from Native American tradition, and for those, if I haven't mentioned before, we use a Native American tradition of using the talking stick. So when in the circle, as the saying goes, no one's above, no one's below, no one's underneath, and no one's in front. Or no one's behind, no one's in front. Get that right. But yeah, basically, so yeah, just the shape itself, it's one of the most powerful shapes in nature. It really represents complete equality. There's no leader in there. There's no, everyone is equal. And there's something sacred about that. I've noticed even over tiny tweaks that we've made to Man Club over the years, like in terms of the lighting. We couldn't have real fire, of course, in the building, but we bought those very realistic looking candles and put them in the middle, and it suddenly transformed things. And you notice suddenly, from where we may have had harsher lighting, as soon as you introduce softer lighting, and you just change it, you bring in that little bit of an element of I don't know, fire or sacred sort of, there's something there that perhaps we genetically have in our beings that comes out. And some of the feelings, like, how many times have you seen a guy hold that stick and just say, wow, this feels really powerful? and they can't verbalize why, but they just know that, that stick over the years, guys have held and said their truth. And that is like, it holds a sacred feeling to it. And the circle is, it's a very powerful thing. And I think also the beauty with the circle and the setup we have, especially now, is that you can always leave that circle. There's space, at the Val Rec Club to actually, if you want to break, just to walk out of it, just to come out and to come back in. And any other shape, it doesn't work. We did it in Alderney, actually. The very first man club in Alderney, we had a small circle set up with the chairs, and they weren't very comfortable, the chairs. And after the break, one of the lads said, "Should we have a sit down on those sofas over there?" And it was more of a sort of a rectangle type shape. And I thought, actually, let's do this at their suggestion. These are the guys that hold the power, let's go with it and let's see what happens. And at the end of the meeting, I mentioned about it. I said, "How much easier did you find it talking in this compared to the circle?" And there was a marked difference. And I visibly noticed the change in body language. So yeah, it's a powerful way to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, I completely hear you in that. And, again, just showing my limited experience of having come to club, there is no greater, more powerful feeling than sitting in a circle with men of all ages, young, old, bigger, smaller, from all walks of life, whether it's, like you said, ex-military, police, or, perhaps even criminals, offenders and things like that. And those of us that live this messy life in the middle, right? And just being able to express yourself, that feeling of, it's just utter surrender and complete self-expression. And I've never found a space that comes closer to it. Because, I mean, like you said, even when we sit with friends, family members, there is this unspoken drive, I think, of humans to want to help each other, to want to suggest to each other, to want to, as well as obviously support each other. But as you said, in that framework, and it really does put my hairs off my arms now just talking about it. But within that
Do you
framework,
want to put some hair on my head while you're there?
but within the framework of that circle, where that you're just there to listen, and it's, for me personally, as somebody who grew up with very ill family members and felt a very strong need to help and try and save a lot of people in my life, to just sit there and have to surrender, any control over helping that individual and just allowing them to be heard, and not feel, for me, it was a beautiful lesson in listening and, becoming far more compassionate and understanding of what other people go through, as well as, the complete sense of freedom that you get if you do have something, or if you come to a man club session with something that you feel like you need to speak and you need to say. But like we said, equally, people come and say nothing, and I think that the magic is just as much in the listening, right, as it is in the expression.
Yeah, and absolutely nailed it with that. I mean, it's reflected in the feedback and what the guys say. So many guys will come along and won't talk, but they will always give a bit of feedback, privately in a message or something, to say, what I heard tonight really resonated, or I really connected with it, or I realized I wasn't alone, which is such the most common phrase you'll ever hear. And the listening aspect of it, again, for myself, just like you, learning that, because when someone's got the stick, you can't interrupt, you can't say anything, you can't jump over them, and you really do. What else are you going to do? You're not going to it's up to you. You can stare at your trainers, or you can actually focus on this person and really listen to them, and that's kind of why it's a beautiful thing to watch as well, of how so many of the guys, myself included, have learned to listen so much better to each other. And it's an art form. It's an absolute art form, and it creates better people. It creates better leaders. The best leaders are those that listen, and I think it's amazing. So it's come a long way in a fairly short space of time as well.
It's phenomenal. I've never experienced anything like it, and like you said, I think for me, who is quite an open person, to come along to club and just witness the transformation that other men experience there, because as you said, how many times have we been at club and somebody's come along and perhaps been quite shy or quite timid or quite reserved, or even you can see there's anger or frustration that's present in them, and perhaps they arrive with no intention whatsoever to open up to the group or to speak, or they might have even just been brought along by a friend, or and I know of scenarios where that's happened. And what happens through that listening to other people and then perhaps even expressing themselves is that's real transformation right there. And one of the things that I wanted to explore with you really was how has Man Club helped men. And we know that Man Club is a totally confidential place. That's one thing we should add is what happens at Man Club in that corny old saying is what stays at Man Club. But I wonder if you have a maybe nameless example or some ideas of the ways in which you found it's really helps people, just to maybe so that someone listening to this might be able to resonate with that story and maybe thinks that it's something that might benefit them as well.
Yeah, I think what really the way it can help, I mean, it had a multitude of ways, but the simplest way to kind of bring that down into a few sentences really, it provides the next steps, by simplifying, by allowing you to realize that, one, you're not alone. It's okay to express what you're feeling. It's off your chest, and then you're there and you're okay, I've done this now. And it's natural to then be like, okay, what is my next step? What's going on there? And you also get to listen to other people. And so often we build stuff up into our heads so much. We create our own stories. It becomes a huge thing. And then suddenly this release has happened, and it's done. And then it's like, actually, okay, tomorrow morning, what am I going to do? And for a long time, so many people, it's like this constant stimulation from phones, from the whole world, from your worries. And this is all it's off you now. And then it's a case of, okay, what am I going to do next? And it's those little things. And you see those little changes. So guys might get together, they might go for a coffee or a beer or something, or have a chat privately. And they might sort of come together on certain different themes or commonality, and then go from there. And of course, it leads to people actually making the next step with healthcare, or having a conversation that's, they need to have. Or even just putting a tiny little steps. I mean, we've heard situations of guys actually just saying, well, in the morning, I just got up 5 minutes earlier, or, Matt Fowler, for example, who's told his story many times, basically said, okay, well, I'm going to try out this sea swimming malarkey you guys do. And I mean, I love that story because, he turned up that morning, I remember, and he was in such a bad place, and came in and I just said to him, how are you doing, mate? And he just went on SHIT. I went, okay. That was it. There was no like, oh my God, what do we do? It was like, yeah, it's cool. He's in a bad place, but he's here with us. And I remember like him first getting in the sea, and and look at him now. That's just one example. I can just name that well, and incredible how far he's come. And he's doing talks about mental health in his work. He's head of private banking at KB, so he's really promoting that on a larger scale, and he's got that audience that's already there. We've got leaders in Man Club. We've got guys that are head of organizations that are now looking at more open door policies and actually looking out for each other. So yeah, it does. I think it brings people together in that commonality. And if you look at teams, you look at the way that men have worked so well together in the past, there's definitely something that exists, I think, on a tribal level between men that I can't fully describe, but you do see it. And wherever there's kind of a common goal or an enemy, it brings them even closer together. And I think that's evolution. Example for a great example would be the England cricket team. They went away on a trip to Bavaria and went through a horrendous boot camp type thing that none of them wanted to do, and they all hated it. But the common enemy, of course, was the boot camp. And at the end of that boot camp, they all had their own little man club. They sat around a fire, and you've got Captain Andrew Strauss talking about his own vulnerability and his fears of failure since an early age. And suddenly the whole team has exposed themselves, but everyone's saying it's okay. And when you're in a situation where you're in the WACA, Australia's biggest ground, and there's 80,000 Aussies booing you, and wanting you to fail, that guy knows your deepest stuff, and you know each other that well. And he ain't going to leave you behind. And it's trained. If you look in the Navy SEALs and you look in the forces, they always try to, look to get 6 to 8 guys every time. It's the perfect number, and they work them through that so they get so close that it's telepathy. It's on that level. And I think it's evolutionary in a sense. And I don't always know how it works, but I know I've experienced it many, many times with guys in sports teams, in man club, in sometimes even on a night out. You can't really put your finger on it. It's an energy. It's a togetherness that's there. And Phil Jackson, the NBA coach, I read about recently, talks about it at length about how teams can transition through certain phases. And, the bigger the enemy, the closer the bond, he says. When I think about when we did the SMS campaign, Stop Male Suicide, that was the enemy, so to speak. That was the foe, and it suddenly, you were there that night, it brought everyone together. There was over 20 guys in that room. There were tears, there was hugs, there was laughter, there was everything in one night. It was just, that night was unbelievable. And it brought so many guys close together for life, one night, that night, of course, again, we can talk a bit about Jed, Jed Kelly, who was a big part of Man Club and such a part of our lives. And, Jed took his life, and we all felt that. But, it was that moment, that we had with each other. And I look back and I think I was so upset when he passed on. And I remember thinking to myself, this seems nuts, because I'm not sat there thinking, oh, crikey, we could have done something more or anything like that. I didn't generally feel that. I actually felt Man Club extended his life, and it was something there that he actually put a smile on his face, and I remember him saying that himself. But what I do remember finding really startling to me was that I was really, really upset and hurt and cut up, and I was like, I've known this guy for no more than 30 hours, and that's like, how often do you meet somebody for 30 hours a day and you're that connected with them? And that to this day will always sort of be a stark reminder that you can form friendships at such a deep level in such a very, very short space of time, and relationships, and yet you can be friends with someone for years and years and years. You could be sat next to them in your office or whatever it might be, and you'll barely even know them, and you'll only have that superficial level. But that's the thing with Man Club and what we've experienced. You start so often at the deep level, and then the fun part, the banter, the guy sort of jokes and ways that we interact with each other comes out over the top of it and makes it even more funny in a way, because you can then take the piss out of each other in a way that's okay, if you know what I mean, outside of things. And I find that really, really fascinating, and that can extend to everyone.
I completely agree, and there's so much to unpick of what you just said there. And some of my favourite points are just the ripple effect that Man Club has out into our culture locally, but also nationally and globally. The power of like you said, like almost activating one man who's a boss or a manager or a colleague in a workplace, who can then invite another man to express himself or hold space. And like you said, with those open door policies, and yeah, it's incredible, the bonds that can be formed and the friendships in such a short period of time. It really is the most magical place. No, I'm interested to ask Phil, because we've got a habit of keeping these sessions to about 30 minutes, I should say.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear, what's next for Man Club. I'm interested to hear about, your views on the future of men's mental health. And then I'd really like us to close just talking more about, how somebody could get involved or, find out more about Club.
Yeah, certainly. I think, future, I think for men in general is, this for humanity in general, I think really, it all comes under that same banner. We're all on this journey. We're all developing. Men, I think, we've got to look at, I think, in specifics, what we talked about before, this subject of masculinity and understanding that. I think we all have elements of masculinity and femininity in each other, and it's just about learning that balance. When we talk about that, we talk about an energy, it's not like, oh, you're a girl, you're a boy. We're talking about the essence of what that might be. So masculinity, that grounded, that force that's strong, protective, femininity, the nurturing, the ability to like connect, that it's bringing those two together in a single human being. And it's just a term of expression as such. And that's the overall thing. And I think for men particularly, we've got to we continue to break down the stigma that's existed for so long. I mean, we came out of war generation where you don't talk about it. I think there's also a balance there as well of kind of learning about ourselves and about when it is time to have the stiff upper lip, and when it is the time to go into a crisis and actually get things done. And men are good at that, but it's also learning about what do we do with that afterwards. Do we hold that in our body, and do we just keep that trauma for that time, or do we learn a way to release it? So it's getting that balance right. A quick example, when I was out on my boat a long time ago and we ran into some trouble, me and my friend, we literally went into that mode. And I remember not feeling a single thing. I didn't feel fear, nothing at all. It was just logical. Okay, let's get stuff done. Let's work through this really logically. No panic, absolutely fine. I trusted him because I've known him since we were kids. We got our boat back into harbour with a bit of help. It was a bit hairy, I'm not going to lie. Looking back now, I was like, Jesus. When we got off the boat, as soon as we landed, literally suddenly then I was like, okay, now I'm allowed to feel emotion. Now it's okay. And you're the same. And he's like, should we go get a beer, mate? I'm like, yeah. And after a beer, it all comes out. The story, obviously, been out in a monsoon, and so it's but that's the process to go through, to be able to use those qualities and traits of what we were taught and what's in our genetics, and also to be using the other side as well to release it in the right healthy way. So yes, it's a long journey in terms of that. I think in terms of what's next for Man Club, well, I'm very interested in the idea of smaller closed groups. It's something that I may be personally working on in the future, and even one-to-one coaching with men, which is something I'm possibly looking to expand. But I think that there's a real space there for guys to come together and to have some accountability with each other. So at Man Club, it's open, and that's why it works. That's the beauty with it. You can come at any time. But there's also space to come together in these smaller little groups, and guys can actually say, okay, what can you do for your community, or what's that next conversation that you need to have, and how can we help you? How can you turn around after a couple of days to say, guys, I don't want to have that conversation with the boss. Can you just give me a lift up here? And then when you do it, that massive celebration together as a group. And I think there's space there for that. There's some thoughts on that that have been coming up for me recently, and yeah, it's exciting. I'd love to have some more conversations with people on that side of things as well. So
yeah, definitely. Well, this is just
you included.
first conversation of many, I hope. And a lot of what you said there about the strong, the bonds that form a community, which is this shared accountability and this meaning and this purpose that you find from, essentially contributing to the betterment of someone else's life. And that's what Welcome Home is all about. That's what the Welcome Home series is all about. It's about, how can we share those gifts and those talents, whether it's love, kindness, or skills with our community for the betterment of everyone's life. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that's come from Man Club, that has come from lockdown, that has come from Guernsey Together, and the situation that we've all faced. And I can't thank you enough, Phil, for coming on today. It's been fantastic. I know that people will find this, hugely interesting, if nothing else, to listen to some of the perspectives that you and I have shared today. But just to kind of quickly finish it off, where can somebody find out more about Man Club if they wanted to, and if they want to come and take part?
Yeah, I think the best thing is the Facebook page. There's a number of, in particular, I've made a few little videos on there. It's only 1 minute 20 or so. It explains what Man Club is and how it works. It's really good to just have a little read through that and a watch. I think that's probably your best bet, the Facebook page. Alternatively, of course, just contact me directly, phil.surry@guernseymind.org.gg, or even just drop me a message on Facebook or whatever, and I'll get back to you and have a chat from there. No, I've got brochures as well, actually. If workplaces or anything, that's another thing. Yeah, like workplaces as such. and all different events and things. Their brochures have gone out quite a bit as well, so they're pretty nifty.
No, that's awesome, mate. Thanks for sharing that. Well, what we'll do is obviously we'll share some of those contact details that you've mentioned afterwards in the footnotes of today's episode, and we'll see if we can maybe put a link into that short video that explains a little bit about what Man Club is, and we'll leave your contact details down there as well, so anybody can get in touch. Yeah. But thank you, and thank you so much, guys, for tuning in to today's session, Stay Well series with my good friend Phil Surry. As the series goes forward, we're really interested to hear from our community about people that they would like to hear interviewed. Perhaps you yourself out there would like to conduct an interview and kind of, sit where I am and have a powerful discussion that can inspire our community with, knowledge or inspiration that can support our well-being. So I would just remind you guys that you can stay up to date with everything that's going on Welcome Home on our website, which is welcomehome.org.gg. You can also check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all the socials. So come and pop your head in. We release regular podcasts, and we will be looking at doing more interesting stuff in the future. So, if you've got ideas, please do get in touch with us, because the organisation, Welcome Home, and its whole aims and values are really about being for the community, by the community. And if it wasn't for, people such as Phil or yourself at home tuning in or sharing your ideas and inspiration, then there would be nothing here. So it's just a testament to the beauty of our own community. So thanks, Phil, for joining us today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you soon. Take it easy.
Yeah. Take care.